Hey guys, so today we are going to continue looking at different world cultures in the world before 1450, from 1200 to 1450. We spent the last 2 days doing the big one, and that's East Asia. And again, what that really means is China. Well, there's lots of different world regions that are going to have different cultural processes, and today we're going to go to the next big one, and that's the Muslim part of the world. Now, normally I would title this with the geographic region, but Islam is going to cross many, many different geographical regions, and as a result of that, it's going to touch lots of different groups of people, lots of different ethnicities, uh, spoken languages, and cultures. Anywhere that you see Islam as the dominant cultural practice, you are going to see these traits. So let's talk about, where do we see Islam as the dominant cultural practice? By the start of this period, 1200, there's 3 world regions where Islam is the dominant cultural practice. Number one, many of you will probably know this, is the Middle East. Islam was created on the Arabian Peninsula, which is this peninsula right here, by an Arabian merchant named Muhammad in the 7th century. And after his death, Muslim warriors and then later on merchants and missionaries are going to spread Islam to all of these regions. By 1200, Islam has been the dominant cultural practice in the Middle East, in North Africa, and in one place in Western Europe. And you're going to need to know this because this becomes sneaky sometimes. Spain. Spain, for over 600 years, Islam was the dominant cultural practice there as well. Now, there's something really, really important to know about the territory where Islam is the dominant cultural practice, and that is this: the 2 most important trade routes, the Silk Road and the Indian Ocean, go through territory that Muslims control. They control the crossroads of trade. Nobody can trade long distances without going through Islam. As a result of that, Muslims are going to be exposed to many, many different types of goods and ideas and technologies and languages and people and cultures from regions of the world that is outside of what different Muslim groups control. A very, very, very important theme in this time period is this: anywhere you see anybody trading long distances, you will also see Muslim merchants there. We talked about this yesterday with China. We said if you were Chinese, you probably knew someone who was Muslim, who was a merchant trading or working in China. Same thing for other regions. If I told you that South Asia, which is India, is an extensive player in trade on the Silk Road, then by definition that means Muslim merchants were probably also in India trading. And we'll talk about, as we go through this unit, all the different groups of people who will be part of activity like that. Muslim merchants outside of these 3 key areas, who live in places like China or East Africa or Southeast Asia, tend to live in small Muslim diaspora communities in urban areas where they keep their own culture and they don't adopt the larger culture. We started talking about diasporas yesterday. We're going to keep talking about this. Anywhere you see trade, any city on a trade route, I should say, if it's not in the Muslim controlled regions of the world, probably has a Muslim diaspora community living in it. Now, politically, Muslims are not united into one big state. There's lots of different political states that Muslims live in. There's not unity at all, especially by 1200. Many Muslim leaders claim to be caliph. Now, this term caliph is important to us. A person who claims to be caliph says, I am the true head of all believers. And again, this is another way of using religion to justify power. All true Muslims, I am your rightful leader. That is what a person who claims to be caliph is. Now, the problem with this is there could be 6 or 7 different Muslim states, and they could all be headed by 6 or 7 different individuals, and all 6 or 7 of them are claiming to be caliph. And sometimes that will lead to different Muslim states fighting with one another. Now, you might say, that's weird. Here's why that can happen. When I say that you're a Muslim, that doesn't really tell me that much about you. It's like saying I'm a Christian. If I told you I'm a Christian, that doesn't really mean much, because there's all these different versions of Christianity out there, and there's all these different denominations of Christianity out there. And many different groups of Christians don't get along with one another. The same is true of Islam. So yes, even though people in the Muslim world share common cultural traits, they don't always share common religious beliefs, and they certainly don't always share common political beliefs. So sometimes you will see examples of conflict between different Muslim states. I'm going to give you an example of one Muslim state today. In the days to come, I'll give you some other examples, and this is the Abbasid Caliphate. By 1200, the Abbasid Caliphate was in great decline. If you look on this map, you'll see 2 different shades of green. The light green was the Abbasid Caliphate at its high point. That was about 800, actually more like 900 AD. By this point, the Abbasid Caliphate had been around for 300 years. But by 1200, the Abbasid Caliphate is in great decline, and all they really control is this dark green territory in Mesopotamia, which is the modern-day region of Iraq. This is an empire that's declining, and their decline is not at the hands of Christians or Jews or Hindus or Buddhists. It's actually other Muslim states who are kind of picking it apart by this point. But I do need you to know that by the start of this unit, 1200, the Abbasid Caliphate is still around, and it had been a Muslim empire that had been around for a long time. And again, the key word here is it was an empire. So by definition, even though I haven't taught you anything about the Abbasid Empire yet, and again, it's called a caliphate, but it's an empire, I've actually told you lots of things about them. Since I've used the word empire, it means they build roads, they promote trade, they're culturally and religiously diverse, they're ethnically diverse. You'll see lots of different languages there, and the groups of people they've conquered, they're tolerant to. All that stuff, and trust me, I'm going to be beating you over the head with that over and over and over. Do you think they have a bureaucracy? Do you think they incorporate groups of people they've conquered into their bureaucracy? You think about what the answer to that question is. Now, I want to give you a specific example of how Muslim states show tolerance. Not everybody in a Muslim empire is going to be Muslim. Many Muslim empires, like the Abbasid Caliphate, were originally created by conquest, and they conquered groups of people that weren't necessarily Muslim. In the Abbasid Caliphate, you would have had large groups of people who were either Jewish or Christian, and in some instances who practiced other belief systems. As a general rule of thumb, Muslims have always been extremely tolerant to groups of people who practice different religious ideas. And many of us today are surprised by that. The idea of Muslim extremism has not done Islam a lot of favors recently, and is not the traditional outlook of Muslim leaders globally. Traditionally, Muslims are very tolerant to groups of people in their empire who are not Muslim. The only caveat is, if you lived in a Muslim empire, like the Abbasid Caliphate, and you were not Muslim, you had to pay was called the jizya. This is a special Muslim tax on non-believers. And some historians have suggested that Muslim leaders in places like the Abbasid Caliphate actually preferred for so many of the members of their empire not to be Muslim because they could just tax more people. That is at least a claim. Like many Muslim empires, the head of the Abbasid Caliphate will claim to be caliph. He will say that he is the true leader of all true Muslims. And again, it's always a he. Patriarchy be a thing. Now, the capital of this empire is Baghdad. I want you to remember that. Baghdad, in this time period, was one of the most important cities on earth. And it was one of the most beautiful and wealthy cities on earth because it was the capital of this once great and mighty empire. The Silk Road itself went right through the city. So there was lots of trade. There was lots of exposure to the outside world. And for many people, Baghdad was the face of Islam globally for hundreds of years. Economically, in this period, Muslims are extremely active in world trade. Extremely, which means they get all the good things that come from it, exposure to other people's goods, ideas, technology, knowledge, and the bad, like disease. And we're going to talk about that more in the coming days. Now, you're going to need to know by the end of this unit, there are 4 major trade routes: the Silk Road, the Indian Ocean, the Trans-Saharan, and the Mediterranean Sea. I've only introduced you to 2 of those so far, but just know this: anywhere that there is long distance trade in Afro-Eurasia, and that's my word for Africa, Europe, and Asia as one landmass, there's going to be Muslims, either as the majority group of people controlling the trade, or you'll see Muslim merchants who have gone to these places, oftentimes living in diasporic communities. So if I told you that the city of Ungle Mugle was on the Silk Road trading long-distance goods, then you might not know anything about that city, but you know that there are Muslim merchants there. And that's how you need to learn material in this class. Learn the ideas, not the details. All right. To become a Muslim, a merchant in Islam, or to become an artisan in Islam, and an artisan is someone who makes fine goods with their hands, are honored professions in Islam. We saw one group of people yesterday in China where merchants had a very low social status in China. Islam is very different. To become a merchant, to be someone who makes fine things with your hands, is a highly valued person. And one of the reasons for that is the individual who started Islam himself, Muhammad, before he became a prophet, he himself was a merchant. So it's like Christians and carpenters. Being a carpenter in Christianity is a glorified profession because Jesus was a carpenter. Well, the same thing is true for Muslims with being a merchant. They're going to want you to know that, well, here's just a map of the major trade routes in Afro-Eurasia. The red is the Silk Road, the blue is the Indian Ocean, green is the Mediterranean Sea, and yellow, this goldish color, is the Trans-Saharan. We'll talk more about these. I just wanted to put this map here so you could get an idea and see some of these trade routes again, because I'd only shown you 2. But anywhere on these lines, if it's outside of the traditional Muslim part of the world that we just looked at, there are still Muslims there who are there trading goods. Now, let's talk about the religion itself. I've already said this. If I call you a Muslim, I have not told you, or if you call me a Muslim, I haven't told you much about my belief system. Islam is very similar to Christianity in that there are wide, divergent viewpoints of what a Muslim is, and not all Muslims get along, and some Muslims have been actively fighting each other for hundreds and hundreds of years. Do you know what religion Muslim extremists have killed the most of in the last 20 years? It's not Christians, it's Jews, or it's not Jews, it's different groups of Muslims who they don't agree with. That's the #1 target of people like Osama bin Laden. Now, here's the basics you need to know about Muslim religion. Obviously, it's much more complicated than this. First of all, it was founded by a figure named Muhammad in the 7th century. He lived on the Arabian Peninsula in the Middle East. That's the first thing you need to know. Here's the big thing. What are we going to call a Muslim? In Christianity, there's one thing that all Christians believe in, and that is Jesus died on the cross for your sins and rose from the dead. After that, beliefs spread all over the place. And you have lots and lots of divergent beliefs, but we're going to call everyone in this class a Christian who believes that thing. Well, we're going to call you a Muslim if you believe in the 5 pillars of Islam that Muhammad himself created. So here are the 5 pillars of Islam. Number 1, faith. There is no God but Allah, and Allah is the Arabic word for God, and Muhammad is his prophet. That is a statement of monotheism, and it's a statement and belief of there is just one God. Also, Muslims believe they worship the exact same God that Christians and Jews worship. Here's the key component about Islam. A Muslim, in the eyes of a Muslim is to a Christian as a Christian says they are to a Jew. What is the difference between a Jew and a Christian? A Christian would say, Jews, we worship the same God, but we have a final piece of God's puzzle that you don't have, and that is the story of Jesus. Well, Muslims will look at Christians and Jews the same way, and they will say, no. God has revealed himself through thousands of years to special people called prophets. Jesus is one of them, a Muslim would say. But the last person to get a manifestation of God's revelation was Muhammad. We're the ones with the final piece of the puzzle, and that is the teachings of Muhammad that Christians and Jews are lacking. So all 3 religions are related, and that's the big difference, is Muslims believe they have the final story of God's revelation that he had been giving slowly throughout time to special individuals. Prayer. All good Muslims pray 5 times a day facing the city of Mecca. This city of Mecca is in the modern-day country of Saudi Arabia. It is the birthplace of Muhammad himself. In the city is the most sacred shrine in all of Islam. It's called the Kaaba, and around it is a giant mosque to this day, and we'll talk more about that in just a second. Fasting. All good Muslims fast during the month of Ramadan. Early in Islam, Muhammad was forced to go on the run. It's a long story. I'm not going to give it to you now. But all true Muslims, during the month of Ramadan, which is the first month on the Muslim calendar, do not eat or drink anything from sunrise to sunset to memorialize the suffering of Muhammad and his early followers. Pilgrimage. All true believers are expected one time in their life to go to the city of Mecca, go to the mosque, and take part in a pilgrimage where they circle the Kaaba 7 times. I'm going to show you a video of that either in a little bit or tomorrow of the Muslim pilgrimage. And for many Muslims, taking the pilgrimage to the Kaaba in Mecca is the most important moment of their life because they are fulfilling one of their sacred obligations. Alms. All Muslims are expected to be extremely generous to those in need. So faith, prayer, fasting, pilgrimage, and alms. Those are the 5 pillars of Islam that all true Muslims, that all people that we are going to call Muslims believe in. After that, again, religious views vary very, very greatly. Social structures. Because it's a missionary religion, Muslims will speak many different languages and be ethnically diverse. If I asked you what a Muslim is, it's the same thing. If I said, what does a Muslim look like? It's the same thing as what does a Christian look like? It could be anything. Every color of the rainbow, representing dozens and dozens of different ethnicities, cultures, languages, practices. But you will see one thing inside of Islam. Anywhere that Muslims spread, their language spreads with them. Arabic. One of the teachings of Muhammad is that the only way that you can properly read the Quran, the sacred scriptures in Islam is to read it in its original Arabic. That to change and translate the Quran into a different language is to change the actual word of God. So all Muslims are required to learn Arabic to read the Quran. So this is going to do a lot of things for Muslims. Very few people will Arabic be their first language. If you lived in Egypt or Spain or were a Muslim merchant in China, Arabic was probably not your first language, but it was a universal second language. Arabic in this time period was a lot like English is today globally, which is if you were in a foreign country and you were a merchant, it didn't take you very long to find someone who spoke Arabic with so that you could trade with them. Arabic becomes the language of trade in the world during this period because of how widespread Islam is, and it became a universal second language. So this was probably in many ways the most commonly spoken second language in the world during this time period, and this is going to help facilitate trade. All Muslim states have all the traits of a civilization. One of those being patriarchy. Just like China, the Muslim world is very patriarchal. You'll see lots of women in the upper and middle classes veiling themselves, covering themselves. This was not an original teaching of Muhammad himself, but this was something that Muslims, as they spread, they adopted these practices from other groups of people, and eventually by 1200, they're very, very widespread. Now, we're going to gloss over this for now, but I do want you to think about this. Why is it upper and middle class that veil themselves and not women from the lower classes? Chew on that, and we're going to deal with that question at the end of this lesson. One thing that you need to know about Islam is alcohol and pork are forbidden. This is all Muslims. And this is also another interesting thing. If you like drinking coffee, tip your hat to the Muslim world. Because alcohol is forbidden, there wasn't that many things that a Muslim could get a buzz off of. But one of them was coffee. And coffee is going to be one of the things that spread anywhere you'll see Muslims. And what do you have to drink coffee? You have to have sugar. And that goes anywhere that there's Muslims as well. So coffee and sugar are one of the things that will cross cultural lines as Muslims spread, because this is an essential component. If you're a Muslim merchant and you can't drink and you need a buzz, let's go drink some coffee. And that was a widespread practice. They're also very important because they preserve groups of people who came before them. Muslims love knowledge, both new knowledge and respecting old knowledge, even if it's not knowledge that came from groups of people who had the same religious beliefs as they did. And we're going to talk more about how they preserve the knowledge of other groups of people at the end and starting tomorrow. But this is actually a pretty big and important thing. Muslims preserve knowledge. Muslims spread knowledge. Remember that. The idea that Muslims being closed-minded and uneducated is a sad, recent phenomenon and a recent stereotype that even in the world today isn't necessarily true, but it certainly is not part of their history. Muslims have always been the forefront of new ideas and cultural exchanges. Innovations. Many, many, many innovations that we practice in the world today, we can tip our hat to Muslims. Things like banks, checking, camel saddles, and a special type of sail that we'll talk about more later, the lateen sail. What do all of these things have in common? These are all innovations designed to help make trade better. Better systems of money, better technologies to put on certain animals, better technologies to put on ships so they can sail farther. Many Muslim innovations are all about supporting and spreading trade. One of them is the caravansary system. Caravansary are roadside inns that are located approximately a day's journey apart on major trade routes. So if you were a Muslim merchant and you were just going to go from Egypt to China, 5,000-mile journey, probably going to take you 6 months. One of the things you knew, the whole way was this. You were never more than a day away for most of the time from a safe place to stay, food, water, and supplies. And that's what caravansary were. So this was, again, a Muslim innovation that was designed to support trade. And caravansary were not just designed to support people, they're designed to house and keep safe and feed your animals. And as we'll see later on, the most important animal in trade is going to be the camel. But we'll get to that story in the days and weeks to come. Muslims are fantastic mathematicians, and because they have fantastic math, there's something that will always go with that: incredible architecture. Personally, I love Muslim architecture. I think it's very, very elegant. I think it's very, very beautiful. And like many things in Islam, it'll be a blend of Muslim cultural practices with the practices of the group of people wherever in the world this is at. What are their mathematical breakthroughs that enable this to happen? Number one is algebra. Algebra was created by Muslim mathematicians actually in the city of Baghdad. And then by the end of this, a very famous Muslim philosopher. And I don't give you that many people's names in this class, so he's very important. Nasir al-Din al-Tusi is the father of trigonometry. Trigonometry is a high order level of mathematics. And because of this, Muslims are going to be able to do things in their architecture and engineering that nobody else in the world will be able to do. So here is your assignments for today. Number one, I want you to think about this. Many civilizations, and we talked about one today, Islam, have practices that restrict women. In China, it's wearing the veil. In Western Europe, it will be wearing very tight undergarments called corsets. In China, they're going to do this terrible, terrible thing called foot binding, where we'll crush the bones of little girls' feet so they end up walking around in a permanent limp. It's awful. It's disgusting. And the question is, why do you see restrictive practices like this put on upper class women and middle class women, but you don't see these practices among the lower classes? I want you to think about that. I want you to write your responses for why do you think that might be? And then we'll answer that question tomorrow together. Number two, Muslim architecture. I told you, I love it. Here's the cool thing about Muslim architecture. You should be able to look at a building and immediately say, oh, Muslims built that. There are certain traits that all Muslim pieces of architecture have in common. So here's what I want you to do. I've got these pieces of Muslim architecture that I want you to look at. And I want you to compare these pieces of architecture to each other. Put up a PowerPoint, copy and paste some slides, put it in there. Make sure you have some slides from the inside and from the outside. And let's see if you can figure out what are the traits that all pieces of Muslim architecture share, so that as we go through this class, I can show you a building and you can immediately say, oh, Muslims built that, or someone else must have built it because it does not have these things. The other thing you can do is I have started to post your Unit 1 study guide. Start to work your way through that guide. This will help you for upcoming tests, upcoming essays. Use the rest of this class time wisely. I appreciate your guys' attention. I know this is a really weird, wonky way of doing this. I will go live and I will take any questions anybody has about any of this stuff. If you do not have any questions, you are free to cut yourself loose and to start your own work. Have a great day. I'll see you guys, I guess, in 2 days.